Hi, everybody. I am so delighted to have here today Sarah Wallace for the School of Charisma. Sarah is a leading regulatory and corporate crime lawyer, and she's got over 20 years of experience in private practice and in-house. She's very well known for financial service regulation, investigation, and litigation. She's a partner currently at the law firm Constantine Law. Formerly, she was the head of regulatory and criminal group and one of the top 20 UK firm. Sarah advised corporates, senior executive in high-profile, complex internal and regulatory investigation, criminal prosecution, regulatory enforcement, related civil litigation and compliance. And she's also a public speaker and a presenter. She's been quoted on the FT, The Times, Daily Telegraph, Evening Standard, New York Times. Sarah, you've been everywhere, Bloomberg, and she's an expert commentator for the BBC News. So I am absolutely delighted when I thought about which person really embodies the ethos of the School of Charisma, which is a school that I'm a co-founder, and that basically propels to transform the way we do business in a more conscious and sustainable trajectory. I couldn't think of a better person to interview than Sarah. So welcome today to the School of Charisma interviews. Sarah, I just wanted to, first of all, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. For a Monday, not too bad.
Great. And I just wanted to ask you what, if you think about the sort of like definition of charisma or like the concept of charisma, what do you think comes into mind?
Yeah, Annalisa, I probably, being a bit more, I'm an extrovert, but I am maybe on the slightly more reserved side of things. I probably don't think of it in the context of charisma, because I'd sort of think, oh gosh, you've got to be on the stage and all the rest of it. I probably, in terms of leadership, I think about it more about authentic, and there's a lot of talk about this now, authentic leadership, in the sense that just trying to be yourself, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. It's a lot easier if you're projecting yourself, within the confines of, professional services that a lot of people work in. I think that's probably how I look at it.
Yeah. So basically, like charisma as expressing who you are, basically. And
yeah,
that's
There's a lot of talk around. I mean, of course, we're living in this pandemic world where now there's very little face-to-face, very, very little, certainly for office-based workers, very, very, very little social contact. But it's this concept of bringing yourself to work, and I think for many years, I'm not new to the workplace. I've worked, for 20 plus years, but for a long time, people would feel that they turned up at their office doors and they left themselves outside and brought someone else in. I sometimes talk about an armor that I wore.
Yes.
Whereas I think now, and this is something that, it's not just, it's been happening slowly, but I think it really changed a couple of years ago, where there is this feeling within corporate environments that, you can bring yourself inside if you want to. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can.
Yes, absolutely. I remember we had a meeting, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, when you were talking about, you were already in your previous law firm, you were still there, and we were talking about how many people come with, their whole self. So the concept of psychological safety at work, which for a law firm is very advanced, because usually when we come from, similar background, in law, and I remember when I was a young lawyer, I had to sort of like put my suit on, and when I was putting my suit on, I was putting my armored sort of like persona, and I couldn't really show private aspects of my life. As you said, if you want to show it, you can show it. So the psychological safety at work is very much allowing people to bring their whole self at work if they wish to share it. So people that have, sort of like invisible disability, or that have got children with problems, or other stuff that is happening to their life. And absolutely. And I think this has been also linked to a more sustainable long-term performance, because obviously it reduces stress level, and it's got this sort of like allows employees to be feeling supported in a safe environment, and so they work better. Otherwise, many of them would have, would shut down and have a burnout. So absolutely, thank you for bringing this up in the context of leadership. So when we talk about kind of charismatic, transformational, authentic leadership, Sarah, is there any historical or current figure that comes into mind that you think and refer to sometimes?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I sometimes think that I should. That's a question that I do read, and I've seen people asking before. And I think so I always think, I need to do more research on that. But I mean, look, I think there are two people who at the moment always do come to mind, and Michelle Obama. I mean, what an amazing woman. She's a lawyer as well, so I suppose I will sometimes identify with lawyers out there. And then the other one who recently, I mean, sort of similar, Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
But what I think is really interesting with hugely accomplished women who are clearly, seen as leaders, huge, is is that sometimes the way that they're portrayed in the media is because of their beauty, which, and of course they are beautiful women, but sometimes the media portrays them as sort of attractive women, and the brains aspect of it sort of is slightly neutralized, which, other commentators will pick up on, because these are hugely accomplished women.
Yes, absolutely. That's really interesting, Sarah, because we are still, as women, I think there is still a lot of work to be done in order for us to be not the same as men, but of equal value. And you've raised an important issue, because usually a very attractive woman is very often classified, okay, she's attractive, and that's the reason why maybe she's made it, rather than really looking at how, what a brain and what really like truly authentic accomplishment she has. And again, this is a subject that would be nice to really deepen, but obviously we don't have time today. But in general, how do you think women leaders, how do you think they present themselves compared to their male counterpart?
Yeah, so over the pandemic, one thing that has come out, one thing that we are talking about more is mental health. And this is a conversation that men are very much now engaging with. I would have said pre-pandemic tended to be a women's thing. Women are more, again, a bit of a generalization, it doesn't apply, but we're empathetic, like to talk. Problem shared is halfway to solving that problem, whereas typically some of the issues men don't deal with. But I think that through this pandemic, there are things which are, I think, creating more problems for women. Part of that is how we present ourselves on Zooms. I've heard, that instances where someone takes over and it's harder to have presence. But equally, everyone working from home is starting to be more of a leveler. But whether but there have been issues if you have caring responsibilities, whether that's creating not a level playing field.
Well, there's been a study that has said over the pandemic, especially the period where, children didn't go to school, that obviously has kind of had affected women much more than men, because obviously they were doing, not all in all instances, but usually it's the woman's responsibility to, help with the homework and do the house chores. And although in many cases there's been a shared responsibility, in other cases, for example, I know in Italy for sure, a lot of women had to basically ask for sabbaticals, or they had to resign. Probably less so in the UK, but still I think the trend is that in those instances, we have to sacrifice, the sort of like the amount of attention we give to work. And certainly that has an impact, that's for sure. But also it's interesting that you said it's been a level playing field, and I'm interested to know what you think, because usually when, we are at work, the boys go for a drink and usually they don't invite, the women. And how do you think this is sort of like impacts? Because there's a lot of business that happens during, in front of a pint, rather than in the office, and there are relationships that gets much more consolidated. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think only time will tell. So a lot of what I read is just, articles. I don't have a huge amount of personal experience because we're all at home. So I think generally the lack of social capital that we have because we're isolated at home is damaging for men and women. I think that if you're an introvert, this is sort of working to your advantage in many ways. I think it's the extroverts out there who are finding it harder. So I am someone who naturally would quite like to have a coffee with someone, and that has all stopped. And Zoom is brilliant. You and I, Annalise, are having a really interesting conversation, but I probably would prefer to see you face to face if I had a choice. But for the introverts, I think it's working quite well from what I read, because they're able to get their head down, produce really good quality work, and communicate maybe in the medium of emails or in a slightly different way. I mean, I think probably what will happen at the end of all of this is it will work to both in, I'll be back in London a bit more, and I don't think we'll go back to where we were, and this sort of happy medium will come. I have heard reports of people not faring so well on Zoom meetings. That's obviously worrying. And as a leader, probably what one has to do with teams is have much more one-to-ones and not do this. I think we're all hearing that the team drinks are slightly waning now in lockdown too, and that the sort of more personal approach, just checking in, whether that's on Zoom or on the phone, is better. Where I think the problem for leaders is in this new way of working is from a sort of how do you supervise properly? How do you ensure that your business is not at risk of fraud or cybercrime? I think people are more relaxed, which can be good, but they also can be bad, because things can be said that might not be said in the office. If you're in banks, I mean, this won't apply in every firm, but how do you guard against insider dealing? There are big issues. How do you guard against sort of passive aggressive bullying on Zooms or over the phone, which just wouldn't happen in the office because people are more on guard? So I think as a leader, there are a lot of challenges to this way. Whilst it can help that people might have more time to see their families or walk the dog or go or just do slightly different things, work at different times, which I'm really supportive of from a well-being and mental health perspective. There are other problems potentially emerging that we haven't quite seen yet that could be quite damaging if you're in a leadership role, which I think then cause more stress.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I agree. What you said earlier about returning into the office and providing an happy medium, I think hopefully everything that we are going through at the moment will bring us in a situation of, equilibrium, of balance. So we'll allow, people to, re-engage physically, but also, not to criticize if you're working from home once or twice a week. And so you can have this happy medium that you were talking about, that it's both good for extrovert and introvert, being, if they are leaders or employees. So Sarah, just another question, is on a general point of view. Given leadership has been always very male orientated, if we think about a leader, I don't know why, but the majority of the people think about a guy, so they use also from a word perspective, he or, him, and not like female sort of a related words. Which qualities do you associate to female leadership that you wish to actually see also in male leadership, so that they are, again, we come to an equilibrium, a balance, so that we have a leadership that is sustainable, that is conscious, that it's basically omnicomprehensive and is a transformational, charismatic leadership?
I mean, I probably would draw back to what the Financial Conduct Authority are doing in relation to culture. And so Megan Butler, very senior woman in the FCA a couple of years ago, started linking the problems of the last recession, the financial crisis, with there being a culture problem, tone at the top. And she, as a woman, started this dialogue, and that's a dialogue that's continuing. And so the idea behind it is that if your culture is right from the top, so that you abhor discrimination, any form of harassment, bullying is very topical at the moment with what's been in the news the last couple of days, that if you get that right and there are good whistleblowing systems and controls, then that will permeate downwards as well. So I think women are quite attuned to those types of issues. But that's not to say that men aren't either, because I have noticed that men are much more in that conversation. There's a huge male contingent within that conversation that maybe I didn't sense a few years ago, but I sense it more now. But generally, I've got to say, I think women generally bring a huge amount of conscientious. I mean, unfortunately, I still think that women have to do phenomenally well to be noticed and to escalate. But the conversation I hear from younger women is they are much more attuned to this now, far more than I was, in the early stages of my career. So they're very aware of brands, how they want to come across. They talk about brand, my brand, and they understand what it means. They understand the importance of mentor, but not just the mentor, sponsors. And they are actively looking for them. They are networking far more than I did. I mean, I get requests from students to link in with me. But I think also it's just this whole sort of social media world that we're in. So I think that younger people and younger women are much more attuned to where they can go and the help that they need.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I think we have basically witnessed a massive, revolution, a quiet revolution, I would say, in the last 20 years. And certainly we, as women, we are in a different place. And I mean, even with, the vice president, the American vice president at the moment, there is certainly open a space where, we can continue to grow in a different way from men, because we're not the same, but we're not the same, but we're certainly equal. And I really do believe that this female quality in leadership are actually being received by men as well. You were talking about mental health, and so I think there is much more dialogue in the field of mental health from men, and more recognition. And I think we're bringing little steps. And I think this pandemic has been horrendous, but has also given us time to reflect on some basic human sort of principle, in a way, of empathy, of sharing, this, what's happening at the moment, we felt all much, much closer. And I think this had an impact on leadership behavior as well. I really thank you so much, Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you here, to interview you. And I think, loads of people would benefit. And if there is anyone that's got any concern with financial crimes, insider dealings or anything, you are the top expert. But also, as I said to you, I think I really admire you as a professional, but also as a human being. You are incredible, absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for being here. And
pleasure.
The School of Charisma sort of like purpose of growing a new sense of where we're going in the leadership sphere. Thank you so much.